views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We continue our series, Race to Mayor, with two unbelievably smart candidates, Scott Stringer, Ray McGuire. Compare and contrast. Coming up now, so stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. Here at today's verdict, and we are so happy to welcome another candidate for mayor. Today we have Ray McGuire. I'm looking forward to this. Ray, how are you doing today?
I am doing well today. I am actually doing quite well. It's exciting to be with you. You command so much respect and admiration, and your audience is, a well-informed audience. And so I'm delighted to be here with you. It's
our pleasure. It's nice of you to say. Ray, let's talk a little bit about your journey, because you've had quite a journey. How'd you get here? Tell the viewers a little bit.
I got here, I come from the neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio. I was raised by my single mother and my grandparents. I didn't know my dad, and they raised me and my two brothers and me. And at any point in time, we had a half a dozen foster children in our home. And I grew up, David, across the street from the Howard paper mill, which sometimes used to emit fumes that were so strong that the only way we could breathe is to open the refrigerator door. And my mother was a social worker. She is today 95 years old. So she sacrificed for me to get a great education. I left home when I was 16. I took a Greyhound bus around New England looking for schools, landed at a school in Connecticut. I met my classmates. They had those short sleeve shirts with alligators. It cost more than my entire wardrobe. So I did okay there. I applied to colleges and went on to Harvard College and then law school and business school. So I came to New York with three things. I had a great education, I had a lot of debt, and I had no money. And this has been great to me.
You sound like my dad, same thing, Harvard and everything. And you start from the bottom up. Well, economically, I don't think there's any dispute that this city is broken. And one of your strengths, certainly I think one of your greatest strengths is just your drive to economically succeed. What would you do for this city? What could you do for this city now that things are not looking so good?
So I have put out, David, what I call the largest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this city. 500,000 jobs. It's called Go Big, Go Small, Go Forward. And the essence of that is the Go Small, which protects a lot of the small businesses. And as you know, the small and family-owned businesses are responsible for half of the New Yorkers in New York City. And so we have to go and give a lifeline, protect those small businesses, and incentivize the formation of new small businesses. My plan does just that. And the go forward part is to make sure that those people who have been excluded get included in ways that they haven't historically. And I'm going to be committed to that because I know that's the future of this city. And that's the only way that this city comes back.
A lot of my friends have left for whatever reason, economic reasons, fear. Want to get them back. Some of them have issues about, taxes that may come up. Some people may have some issues about homelessness. Let's talk first about getting them back financially, which is what really our city needs. We need the taxpayer money. We can't just rely on the federal aid. What are your thoughts?
You're exactly right. Well, let's first start with the federal aid. There is an enormous amount of support coming out of the $1.9 trillion American CARES Act, of which New York will be the beneficiary. So I do not think that at this time it's necessary to levy the taxes that are now being discussed. That is way too divisive. We have, for the past 7 or 8 years, alienated business. We need business. There's a report today that JetBlue, who has much of their headquarters here, are thinking about relocating some of the headquarters. That's a lot of jobs, David. We do not need to be the biggest advertising agent for South Florida or for Florida in general. We're not getting paid anything for it. We need to begin to advertise for New York and all New Yorkers. We need to change this. This is not working. We need to fix this and stop the divisive, alienating narrative that we're now in the midst of.
There's a quality of life issue that I think when you want those with means to come back to the city and spend their money, there's a fear, that the city has changed in the year. The homeless are around. Listen, I see it. I didn't leave Manhattan, so I know, the city has changed. What can we do to give the confidence to those people to come back that New York's going to be just as wonderful as it has been over the last 15, 20 years? Let's start with the homelessness.
So first, the objective is for our best days to be in front of us, not behind us. And if we keep on this path with inept leadership or people who have given out press releases and have not done anything, we're going to continue in this trend. Homelessness, we need to prevent homelessness. We need to have the services for those who are formerly incarcerated. We need to have services for those who are suffering from mental illness. We need to have services for those who are suffering from drug abuse. We need to prevent the homelessness, and we can. It shouldn't be the case that we have so many New Yorkers who are without when we have so many limited number of New Yorkers who are with. And so my plan is to go prevent homelessness, to give them the necessary services, and to go from homelessness to an immediate stop at shelter as we get them into more permanent homes. And that's the objective. The objective is not to keep 50,000 or so people in a homeless condition or in a shelter. We got to move them out. And we need to be dedicated to this because we need to have a sense of urgency.
I think personally, people in the city fear more those who are affected by mental illness than any other group because it's so unpredictable. And we feel for those with the mental illness. There are things that they can't control. Of course, there is medicine, but sometimes they might not necessarily take the medicine. I was reading a little bit about your emergency social services, basically dealing with mental health issues. I think it's a very smart idea. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, what we have decided to do here, David, as we think about how we develop a relationship between law enforcement and the community is to insert a organization, emergency social services, 24 hours, 7 days a week, that we deploy either before or with the NYPD. And why is that? Because we need to meet each situation with proportionality. It has been said by many, if the only thing that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. In many of our communities, Black and brown communities especially, it's a sledgehammer, which is disproportionate. Let's get those people in who can manage the situation, who are the professionals, like the emergency social services, so that we can get them in and so that they go and respond to the situation proportionately. Many of the challenges we're having, which have been uncovered by COVID and which have been exacerbated, made worse by COVID, we can solve them by getting the right professionals into those situations before we have a disproportionate response, which we've seen that is in tragedy, the loss of so many lives, which we can prevent. And the emergency social services is intended to do just that.
And I would be remiss if that didn't really lead, unfortunately, to the issue of crime. Crime is up in the city. That's a big deterrent to getting people back here. There's always perception is everything, Ray. That's the way it is. And if you're perceiving a crime-riddled city, you don't want to run back here. You want to stay in Florida or wherever you are. Not that crime isn't bad there, but why come back here? So my question to you is, what are we going to do with respect to building trust in the police department of New York City? That's got to be so important, and I'm sure high on your priority list. What are your thoughts there?
Well, David, that trust has been breached in large part because we have not held those serial abusers for whom we pay $200 million a year accountable. We need to have accountability. It's going to start with me. I have outlined the appointment of a deputy mayor for public safety so that we can have a more direct day-to-day involvement in the management of the policing across our communities. You talked about the emergency social services. We want to instill that. I want to make sure that we have a chain of command responsibility. So not only those officers, the law enforcement who commit the acts, but also the entire chain of command. Because what that has done is created a cloud over the entire force. I want to have better policing. I also want to make sure that we return to community policing. Remember when we had police athletic leagues and when we had the community centers?
Let me tell you something, Ray. My father grew up in the PAL. He talks about it all the time. His boxing, that was his way growing up in the South Bronx to really grow before he went to CCNY and on to Harvard. It was a way, gave him a place to go and feel like part of the community. So, and I've donated to the PAL. I'm a big fan of the PAL. I just want you to understand that I completely agree. And the reason I wanted to stop you is that this quote that you gave, I think, is so important, which I really think the viewer should know. I know when I change from my business suit to a sweatsuit, I could be the next George Floyd or Eric Garner. That's powerful stuff. Does that influence what you want to do, really?
It has a direct influence on what I want to do. I understand what it's like to be out there. I understand what it's like to be a 6'4", 200-pound Black man that at any moment in time can be mistaken for something else or someone else. Right. And so, yes, it is critical. I want to return to community policing. I want to get, we also need to have jobs. David, give ourselves summer jobs. I had a summer job. I dug ditches, I laid tile, I changed bedpans, I DC'd IVs. I made boxes in the basement of Phil's dress shop. I was a gopher, but it kept me out of trouble. And I could go to the community center. I could work with PAL. We knew who the officers were. So yes, exactly. That's what we need to be focused on. Let's prevent the situations which we know are easily preventable. It's hard work, I get it, but we ought to be dedicated to this.
So which I like, the McGuire Plan for Safety and Justice. I've read it, it's a lot. Just what do you think? I mean, how do you really get a task force together to implement it? There's a lot there.
Well, you get people who are committed. Part of what I bring to this, David, is I can bring people together.
Yeah.
We need a coalition. We are broke, we're broken, and we're divided. All the narrative out there is a divisive narrative. We need to bring ourselves together, especially in communities like the Bronx that are suffering as much, if not more, than any of these other communities. We need to bring the coalition together to focus on the improvement of the lives of the people who are the most marginalized. We got to stop this. We got to be outraged.
When I do pick juries and I have a voir dire and I get the Bronxites in a room, I see the distrust of the police if it's a police brutality case or something else. So I hear it, whether they dismiss themselves or we dismiss them because they can't be fair. There's a lot of mistrust. Final thoughts. It's a big job. I know you want it. What do you have to say to the viewers of the Bronx?
On October the 15th, I called my 94, now 95-year-old mother and told her I quit my job. She thought I'd lost my mind. So I thought you had a good job. And yes, Mom, I did. But at a moment in time when the city that I love is going through so much stress, going through the crisis of COVID, going through the crisis of the economy, going through the crisis of religious and racial hatred, and going through the crisis of climate, that if there's a moment in time when I can bring my lived experiences, which is the foundation that you gave me, and what I've been fortunate to do while I've been in the city, all the blessings and all the opportunities I've been given, and give those opportunities to all New Yorkers, but especially those who look like me. I haven't termed out. I have not been part of an administration. And I'm not looking for promotion. I'm looking to do something and change the course of history in the city that I love. And unless we do something now, they ain't no cavalry. They ain't no plan B. So I welcome the support. It's rayformayor.com. I need the support of all New Yorkers. It ain't about me, it's about we. And together, we can make certain that in this city that we love, that our best days are ahead of us and not behind us, especially for those precious ones called our children.
All right, Ray, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. Good luck to you. Hopefully we'll have you back the next couple of months, see how you're doing.
I'd love to be back. So thank you. And again, a lot of respect and admiration.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. We got more for today's verdict right after this. back to today's verdict. We are so excited. We have one of my favorite people, Scott Stringer, on the show, mayoral candidate. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm good. It's good to be on the show.
Let's get down to it. We got a little bit of a broken city here. I don't think much of us will debate that. And first and foremost, let's talk about a little economics, because you got a good background in economics. What are your thoughts on how the city is shaping up right now and what you think you might be able to do to fix it?
Well, you hit the right question, because just to take you back to a year ago, right before COVID hit, the unemployment rate in the city was 3.4%. We had added 970,000 jobs over 10 years. And I mean, we were strong economically. And once this virus came, the unemployment rate went from 3.4% to 20%. And those 970,000 jobs, we lost them in 30 days. And so this really was depression-like conditions. We had to literally shut down the entire economy. And a lot of people lost those jobs, had trouble feeding their families. And we know the tragedy that occurred with the tremendous loss of life. So we have to build back this city carefully through the lens of science. And we have real challenges ahead of us. And that's what this mayoral campaign is going to be about. Who's ready on day one to walk into City Hall, bring the economy back financially, deal with issues of health disparities, and we continue to have a larger discussion about the social justice issues facing New York.
You know, it's always been a city of have and have-nots, and certainly with the pandemic, it's been brought out a little bit further. You know, I can see my clients in the South Bronx really got hit very hard. Health reasons because of COVID, and then financial reasons. What can we do to get the small businesses, the restaurants back? How do we infuse the cash or whatever we need to kind of get it going again?
Well, this is the issue. And I'm glad you mentioned your clients in the South Bronx, because one of the things that COVID did do was it discriminated. You know, my mother died of COVID, and she died in April 3rd in a Bronx hospital. And the doctors there said to me, you know, even though your mom passed away 86 years old, it's a terrible tragedy. It still stays with me every day. But they also said, you have to recognize that people who are dying in this hospital are 50s and in their 40s, and they're Black and they're Latino. And it's because the city has never invested in solving these health disparities. We've sort of allowed people to live and let live. And COVID said, no, that's not good enough. And so we do have to think about the budget and the programs and the investment we make in so many of the hard hit communities. And that's where the stimulus money and I think smart planning by City Hall can really make a difference over the next few years.
You know, we also want to get back, and my friends have left. Many people, they say they may come back, they may not. We want their tax dollars back. It's so important. Do you think they're coming back, and what can we do? You know, I know some of the other mayoral candidates have plans to try and, you know, get the tax revenue back and, you know, build up the city again. What are your thoughts about that? How are we getting them back here?
Well, look, I want everyone to be here, stay here. If you left, we want you to come back. We've seen exodus at some of the most difficult times in the city's history, from the 1970s to after 9/11. And one of the things that has always kept the city going is the value proposition that mayors have with the citizens, which is to restore quality of life, to create an economy that's possible to do business, to invest in our small businesses who are the ones hurt hardest. Look, the truth of the matter is the big corporations on Wall Street, they made $38 billion during the pandemic. They did just fine. Trump gave them their stimulus package. They're good to go. The real challenge for the city is, what do we do about the middle class, the working poor, the frontline workers? And how do we invest in a 5-borough economy that meets their needs? And that's going to be the challenge for the next mayor. And that mayor has to have real experience managing the city's finances, knowing where there's waste, where there is, where money is being spent that's not doing so good. And that's what I'm hoping to do if I win.
With respect to the, you know, you mentioned a little bit about the quality of life. You know, I didn't leave Manhattan. I didn't run anywhere else. I was here during the entire time. My wife, who's a dentist, finally got back to work in her office when she could. I was practicing law from home, and I go in and back to the Bronx when I have to. But there is a sense, certainly where I am, that the homeless, there's an uptick. You see it. It's not something that you can really ignore. What And how can we fix it if it's possible?
Look, over the time of de Blasio's mayoralty, homeless spending went from 1.6 billion to 3.2 billion, yet we have more homeless people than ever before. We have half the homeless population are children, and the conditions in these shelters are deplorable. And no human being should ever be forced into one of these shelters. So what we have to do is have a mayor who is going to build the housing that we need. 30% of the people who live in homeless shelters work, but there's no housing for them. And I have a proposal to use our vacant property, our vacant land, and build the kind of low-income housing we need. So we stop spending billions on shelters and start spending money on a real affordable housing plan. That's what Mayor LaGuardia did. That's what Ed Koch did. Every mayor has a housing plan. The problem with this mayor is this housing, the housing that he built was unaffordable. It was affordable housing, but it was actually unaffordable to the people who needed it the most.
You know,
You have to right size that.
I also see like the New York City Housing Authority. I see the buildings. My clients are always in the buildings. They're getting injured. Locks aren't working. You know, the crumbling ceilings. This stuff really happens. You know, it's almost like you want to move the homeless and you want to get the homeless into the proper buildings, but the buildings are falling down. How do we fix that? And not just building new ones, but how do we fix the buildings we already have?
Look, we're going to need to really manage the NYCHA developments and go building by building and make the repairs. And we're going to have to put a dollar amount next to, next to that price tag. And, you know, part of my housing plan is to invest in NYCHA. Look, we're going to have to put money into these buildings before they collapse. And we have to make that investment. Now, I hope under the Biden administration, under the stimulus dollars, we will start to get the billions of dollars that they've owed us for a very long time. You know, when LaGuardia built public housing in the 1930s, it was aspirational housing. When I was growing up in Washington Heights, there was no difference between Dyckman houses and where I lived a few blocks away. We were just a bunch of kids from the neighborhood. Today, if you go to Brooklyn, you see Ingersoll houses, you can see that complex just disintegrating because of the lack of repairs. But across the street is a bright, shiny luxury building. People are walking across the street to the shiny building and leaving the backbone of the city behind. This next mayor has got to manage for real change and lead a delegation, the business community, the labor community to Washington to get that NYCHA money, and also figure out new revenue streams to fix the boilers, the windows, and all the things that human beings should expect from their government.
Listen, Scott, I want to ask you about a new plan you have, Asamos con Stringer. I'm not too great in my Spanish. I'll give it a shot. Tell us a little bit about it.
Asamos con Stringer.
Asamos con Stringer. Okay. Tell me.
Well, look, it's part of our campaign and highlighting the rich diversity of the city. The next mayor has got to be somebody who doesn't just talk to the people who look like me or talk to the people who look like you, but to build a broad coalition. And our Latinos for Stringer coalition is 100 strong from all 5 boroughs. I've been endorsed by some amazing people, Senator Jessica Ramos, Congressman Adriano Espaillat, and the list is, you know, in the Bronx, Amanda Septimo, and I can continue, but we don't have enough time. But one of the great parts of Latinos for Stringer is that my stepfather of 35 some years is leading the charge, along with my stepbrothers, Carlos Cuevas, who, by the way, in his time was the former deputy borough president of the Bronx, the former city clerk after David Dinkins. And it was very exciting when we announced this to see the whole family, you know, the Stringer side and the Cuevas side. And I believe that we're going to compete very heavily for votes in the Latino community, in the rich, diverse Latino community. And it was a very exciting launch.
You know, the Latino community, African-American community, certainly my community in the Bronx has been having an issue with law enforcement for a long time now. I know when I pick juries and I do voir dire, you know, the police brutality cases, you just sense it. You know, this isn't made up. The jurors, the clients, they have a poor perception of the police. Where do we even start to repair the relationship?
Look, the next mayor is going to have to control the police department. And de Blasio lost control of the police lost control of him. We saw some very horrific acts during the summer protests when many of us were protesting Black lives and the outrageous deaths of so many people, from Eric Garner to Breonna Taylor to George Floyd. And there has to be a reckoning. And what we have to start to think about is how we come up with a community policing plan that does not over police communities of color. And it's not complicated because this is happening around the country, these discussions, and New York is lagging behind. We are asking our police to do too many things. They're not social workers. They're not guidance counselors. It's not what they do. But yet we call them for every complaint under the sun that has nothing to do with a crime in progress. What are we doing here? I would have police officers do their jobs. We have to make sure that we do better in terms of catching the people who are doing the dangerous crime. Our rates are at a historic low of 26%. So we need to beef up our detective divisions and do that work. But we also have to reinvest some of these police dollars into keeping kids out of the criminal justice system with violence interrupters, with programs that we know work. And we don't need to have police called when there's a mental health issue in the streets. That's what professionals are for.
Final thoughts. We don't really have much.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. I know we got to let you go. Big job ahead of you. What do you want to tell the viewers?
Look, I'm ready on day one. I'm a former assembly member, so I have served in the legislature, and we certainly have to reset our Albany relationship. I'm a former borough president of Manhattan, where I've worked on land use and zoning issues through the lens of community-based planning. And as controller, I've managed the $240 billion pension fund, hit our actuarial targets to protect retirement security, but we also did a whole lot more. I audited every city agency. I held Bill de Blasio to a high standard. We rooted out waste, we rooted out fraud, and nobody goes into this job better equipped than I to meet these challenges. And look, we cannot afford a mayoralty on training wheels. I think we need someone with real government experience who has a vision for the future of the city. So I hope people consider me.
All right, well, stay with us. We have so much more. Today's verdict, we'll be right back right after this. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have an issue that you'd like me to discuss on a future edition of Today's Verdict, just feel free to email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. Until the next time, remember, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.